On November 15th in the year 1867, the first stock ticker is unveiled in New York City. The arrival of the ticker ultimately revolutionized the stock market by making up-to-minute prices available to investors around the country. Prior to this development, information from the New York Stock Exchange, which has been around since 1792, traveled by mail or messenger. The ticker was the brainchild of Edward Callahan, who configured a telegraph machine to print stock quotes on streams of paper tape, the same paper tape later used in ticker tape parades. The ticker, which caught on quickly with investors, got its name from the sound its type wheel made. The last mechanical stock ticker debuted in 1960 and was eventually replaced by computerized tickers with electronic displays. A ticker shows a stock symbol, how many shares have traded that day, and the price per share. It also tells how much the price has changed from the previous day's closing price and whether it's an up or down change. A common misconception is that there is one ticker used by everyone. In fact, private data companies run a variety of tickers. Each provides information about a select mix of stocks. On November 15th in 1917, with his country embroiled in a bitter international conflict that would eventually lead to the continuance of eternity of 1 million of its young men, 76-year-old Georges Clemenceau is named Prime Minister of France for the second time. The young Clemenceau was first elected to Parliament in 1876, 5 years after France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. From that time on, he considered the newly united Germany a menace and another war as inevitable, given that Germany believes that the logic for her victory means domination. With a strong rate of industrial growth and a steadily increasing population, Germany pressed its advantage in the ensuing decades, while France's economy remained static and its birth rate remained in decline. Clemenceau, who served as prime minister from 1906 to 1909, remained vehemently anti-German, arguing for greater military preparedness and tighter alliances with Britain and Russia. Clemenceau's predictions were confirmed in the summer of 1914 with the outbreak of World War I. 3 prime ministers, René Viviani, Aristide Briand, and Paul Painlevé, served during the first 3 years of the war, as the continuing carnage of the battlefield combined with internal turmoil to bring the country's morale to an all-time low. In November of 1917, President Raymond Poincaré put aside his personal dislike for the, quote, tiger, as Clemenceau was known, and asked him to return as prime minister. Despite a long history of animosity between the two men, Poincaré recognized that Clemenceau shared his desire to defeat Germany at all costs and had the will to carry that desire to its end in spite of defeatist factions within the French government who called for an immediate end to the war. Immediately after taking office, Clemenceau had his most vocal pacifist opponent, Joseph Caillaux, arrested and charged with treason. He subsequently vowed no surrender, telling the Chamber of Deputies that France's only duty was now as to cleave to the soldier, to live, to suffer, to fight with him. Over the next year, Clemenceau would hold his country together through the darkest days of the war and finally into the light. In November 1918, when he heard the Germans had agreed to an armistice, the old tiger broke down in tears. Name correction, in French it would be Joseph Caillaux. At the peace conference in Paris in 1919, Clemenceau stood alongside U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, our nation's 28th president, and Prime Minister David Lloyd George of Britain as the 3 central negotiators. Clemenceau personally disliked both men, once famously remarking that he sometimes felt himself, quote, between Jesus Christ on the one hand and Napoleon Bonaparte on the other, unquote. Wow. He especially clashed with Wilson, whom he viewed as far too idealistic in his view of the post-war world. Though Clemenceau successfully insisted that the Versailles Treaty required German disarmament and stiff reparations, as well as the return to France of the territories of Alsace-Lorraine lost in the Franco-Prussian War, he remained dissatisfied with the treaty in its final form, believing it treated Germany too leniently. Many in the French electorate agreed, and in January of 1920, they rejected their old hero as prime minister. In his subsequent retirement, Clemenceau published his memoirs, The Grandeur and Misery of Victory, in which he predicted another war with Germany would break out by 1940. He continued his eternity on November 24th in 1929 in Paris. It was November 15th in the year 1923. Accused of rape, a man named James Montgomery, an African-American man, his struggle for justice initiates. Now, on this, I didn't get too many pictures of James Montgomery, so please bear with me. There's like the same picture that's redone over. Mamie Snow, a mentally disabled white woman from Waukegan, Illinois, claims that James Montgomery, a black veteran and factory worker, raped her. Montgomery, who was promptly thrown in jail, spent more than 25 years in prison before his conviction was overturned and he was released. From the start, Montgomery's trial seemed ill-fated. Local Ku Klux Klan members threatened Montgomery's lawyer during the proceedings. And in 1923, after a weak defense and a trial that took less than a day, Montgomery was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Sad. While serving time, Montgomery studied the law in an attempt to prove his innocence. In 1946, he convinced civil rights attorney Louis Kuttner to investigate his case. Kuttner discovered a medical report from Snow's hospital stay revealing that not only was Snow never raped, she was likely a virgin. Kuttner also located additional evidence suggesting that the Klan had framed Montgomery and that prosecutors had withheld medical evidence from the defense. Nonetheless, it took Kuttner 3 more years to have the unjust conviction overturned. Montgomery was finally released in August of 1949. The information documented and divulged on this audio file can be verified on history.com.